Hey there everyone, it's Joe from Ainslie's Gold Silver Standard Insights, brought to you by goldsilverstandard.com and ainslieBullion.com.au. Today's topic is the new austerity dollar. That's posted on the Ainslie website. I'll post a link below for you to follow along. And we have Chris Tipper here to break down the article. And joining Chris today, Alex Hutchinson from Siltech Precious Metals. So, Chris and Alex, over to you.
Thanks, Joe. Austerity in Europe didn't work back after the financial crisis or in countless other examples around the world throughout history. But that's not going to stop us going down that same path and using the same faulty logic once more. Tomorrow, we'll see another rate rise from the RBA, probably 0.5%, which will put further pressure on households and families. Even though this is a large rate rise by historical standards, we'll likely see the US raise by even more, potentially 0.75%, early Thursday morning our time. And that could push the Aussie dollar lower yet again. And so the cycle continues, with a lower dollar leading to more imported inflation, leading to higher rates, and around we go. Alex is joining us today to give us a bit more background behind this specific mechanisms driving this cycle and the dangers of poor policy decisions by governments that can actually add fuel to the fire that they're trying to put out. So welcome back, Alex.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
So let's dive straight in with it, because you put that piece together today that was looking at austerity and a number of things actually and how they interplay. So can you start off sort of by telling us what you mean by the term austerity? And then following on from that, why is it being rewarded and seen as a good thing by governments? And let's face it, the markets are also responding quite positively to that around the world right now.
Yeah, so austerity is basically a fiscal government policy. So that is aimed at either reducing spending or increasing taxes. So just reducing the money in the economy by taking it from everyone. So in the last couple of weeks, what we've seen is the bond market liquidity issue that we've spoken quite a bit about. Mm-hmm. And we've seen people trying to raise tax, reduce tax, everything. And whenever they try to loosen their fiscal policies, the bond markets collapse because the bond market's looking at interest payments and the inability of governments to pay them back. So what's left? Austerity. So we've got the new Sunak government come into the UK,
yep.
And he is specifically looking at reducing their budget deficit by about 50 billion a year. And the pound is miraculously back to where it was before the Truss government decided to cut taxes. So that's basically what's going on.
So there's a very direct correlation there, isn't there, between how the market has responded and when the moment the government turned back to looking at austerity, they really did reward them, didn't they?
Yeah, and the Australian government has been basically, people have been saying that it's a fairly austere budget, which I'd agree with. Yep. And so that was rewarded almost immediately with the dollar jumping nearly 2 cents. But we're back down another cent. So here we go back down the cycle again.
And it's a funny one, austerity, isn't it? Because from the average person's perspective, they might think, like a government might go, well, reining everybody's, tightening the belt, reining everything in is a good idea. But from the average person's perspective, we don't really like doing that. So it's interesting that the market responds so positively. When you think about individuals, it's really not positive news. I suppose leading on from that, when you look at the US, they're not really looking at austerity. In fact, they seem to be doing the opposite from everything I can tell. So why is it that the US can get away with not really looking at austerity when everyone else feels like they need to take this path?
I think we've sort of spoken about this a lot. The US is just being rewarded right now for being the reserve currency. Yeah. Last week, we spoke about the fact that they've still got $2 trillion that they've got to find a home for. But while the Fed continues to raise interest rates at a faster pace than the rest of the world, and you've got a worldwide bond market, if the interest rates on bonds are higher and people are going to get rewarded for buying those bonds at a higher interest rate, the money is just going to keep going to the US. Mm-hmm. So they don't need to look at austerity. Everyone else is looking at austerity because nothing else is working. But some of the things that have happened recently, on the 23rd of October, South Korean government actually needed to step in to support their bond market because it froze up. The government and BOK, there was a statement saying the government and Bank of Korea agree the current market situation is very grave. So they're extremely concerned. Then on the 11th of October, we all know what happened then with the Bank of England having to step in to stop the collapse of the pound, which we've just spoken about has reversed itself. So the money's just going to keep going to the US, as it'll be the last bond market to collapse. Everything else should collapse before it. So they don't need to look at anything else for the moment.
So that's not really very fair in my view of the world. That's a problem that in many ways we could argue they created, and then they're the last ones to actually have to tighten the belt, have to suffer from that.
The world created that problem by letting there being a reserve currency in one currency.
Yeah, and that's true. I suppose you can't really just push the blame. We do have to accept some responsibility, because while we allow something to happen, it's still our fault, isn't it, in some ways? So that probably brings me to my question that I'd really like to get your insight on. How do we fix that here in Australia? Because, I mean, probably we can't necessarily fix it, but how do we avoid some of those pitfalls? Because we've seen those issues in the countries that you've mentioned where they've had to step in and step up that talk around austerity. Is there any way that we can avoid falling for those same pitfalls?
Well, I guess it was really good in some ways that maybe our government's been fiscally responsible, because no one else has been that way for a long time.
Yep.
But we've also spoken about monetary, fiscal sort of economics. Most of the issues in the world right now, most of the inflation is because of fiscal shocks. Now, Ukraine war, labour shortages, and climate change causing some food issues around the world. So that's what's been driving inflation. So it's all very well and good taxing people more or putting budget cuts in. But if you are not dealing directly with the fiscal shocks, then you're not going to fix the situation. So sadly, no matter what, the RBA is going to have to keep following the monetary policy of the Fed. Otherwise, we're just going to have our dollar sink, and we'll continue in this interest inflation cycle that we just can't avoid. So what the government really needs to do is start addressing some of these fiscal shocks. So the biggest one, and the one that was again back in the news today, is the gas prices. Gas prices in Europe and worldwide have been falling, but they've doubled in the last 2 weeks from what I can see in Australia, or at least in Victoria.
And that makes, just to clarify here, we are a net producer of gas, right?
Yep, and we've signed a heads of agreement to be on a world market where the world market's coming down and we're doubling back up. So, I mean,
that doesn't add up.
No, explain what's going on. I'd love to know. Everyone would love to know.
Yep.
So you've got the government right now their election promises were increased manufacturing again, which was going really well because after COVID, there was a localization of a lot of production and reduced energy prices. Now, those two things are not going to happen if we continue down this same gas path. The ex-head of the ACCC got up today and actually proposed that anything uncontracted in gas in Australia should be given to the Australian market at under $10 a gigajoule. These mechanisms, if the ACCC is proposing it, surely the mechanisms are there that the government can follow, but they're not choosing to. So we're just going to continue down this path. But as far as Australia is concerned, we are lucky that we have these resources. The rest of the world does not have them. We can avoid a recession, unlike some of these other countries like South Korea and Europe, where their resources are not there. But we have to be smart about the way we use it. And to date, it's been, I think the gas crisis sort of started in about March. So we're now sort of 7 months down a track. And I remember in March, they were saying, pull the lever on the gas mechanism, and the government was saying, oh, well, that means it won't happen until next year. Well, we're nearly at next year and nothing's been done. So I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I'm going to take an optimistic sort of read on what you've said there, that there is hope. We just need to be a little bit more clever about how we deal with it. And you make a really good point about we're very lucky in Australia that we do have all of these resources. So we have the tools available. We just need to use them correctly if we want to avoid some of these pitfalls. And we're lucky that we can see this happening in other countries around the world. So we can look at that and say, well, here's what not to do. They're really giving us a blueprint, aren't they?
They are. So, yeah, best not to go down the austerity path. It's just going to prolong what's going to happen in Australia.
And it doesn't work. Like, we know definitively it doesn't work. So why are we going down there again?
Why? Well, yeah, I mean, the UK government right now, you tell me what option they have. We have an option. What do you think they have?
Yeah, exactly. And Brexit's sort of coming back to bite them a little bit there, I think, as well, isn't it?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you for all that. There was a lot in that today, and it was a bit of a different angle from what we've been looking at. So I really appreciated that. And we'll pay attention to see what happens with our interest rate rise on the table tomorrow and the US one on Thursday morning. So it'll be a big week of data, and we'll catch up next week and see where we landed.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Alex.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for being on the show again, Alex. Chris, I'll see you on the next one. And for the audience, head over to the Discord channel. That's discord.gg/gold. Perfect place to continue the conversation. Chris will be there for the next 1 or 2 hours after the upload of this video. So head over there, ask your questions, get a response, and give us your feedback. We really want to hear from you. I want you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Ainslie Bullion, for the wide range of informational videos, including specials and more that we have on the channel 5 days a week. And while you're there, head over to goldsilverstandard.com, because that's bringing gold and silver into the digital world. As we say here at the end, balance your wealth in an unbalanced world. Take care, and we'll see you next time.